yesterday, so it's just us.
Cool.
Boom.
All right. Well, since you're recording, I guess I'll start. Welcome to the Agones community meeting for July 28th, 2022. Let's maybe start at the top of the agenda. I threw a bunch of stuff in here, not a bunch, a couple things in here last night for us to cover and sort of put the word out about. And I don't have the doc up, but if I recall correctly, the first thing was the release candidate. They got published yesterday. Anything in particular you want to say about the release candidate? It's there. Please test it.
And there's good stuff in there.
Yeah, we had stuff moving up the feature list. So one of the things I often put on the agenda for this meeting is where are we at on features? Should we be promoting features? And with this release, we've got 2 features that did get bumped up. So we've got one that moved to stable and one that moved to beta, which means it's on by default, which is great.
We also had fixes for the alpha feature for handling graceful shutdown. So basically, so that there's a feature in there that if the SDK stays alive until it moves to a shutdown state on when the when a termination request comes through to the processes, such that if you're using some kind of preemptible or spot VM or something like that, and the node gets removed, you can still do stuff to the SDK until such time that it moves to shutdown. So I fixed some bugs in that, so that should actually work better now, I think.
Yes.
Trying to see, is there anything else in the changelog that? Oh, the changelog link is broken. I found a bug. I found a bug. That README link is broken.
We also got the Unity Alpha SDK stuff in for this release, which is nice. If you're using Unity, you can now do the player tracking stuff, right?
Yep. Actually, I just found a bug in the whole release. Oops.
Are they all broken?
Yeah, this all says 1.125.0 and not 125.0-RC. And that's why all the links are broken.
I'm just checking the 124 one. Is that one broken too?
These
the 124 one has
no, 124 is great. Yeah, that one's got the wrong thing. You actually picked it up at the top and that is broken.
Not further down.
I'll send a PR while we're talking. That's right.
Okay, cool. Anyway. So the next thing I put on the agenda was we've talked about in the last couple releases about starting to add support for ARM, and the ARM support that landed in the prior release, in the 1.24 release, has been tested and works on GKE. It most certainly works other places too, but GKE has announced support for ARM, and we know that Agones works with that. So it's, I think, now in a pretty good place, although it's from the Agones perspective, it's in a similar state as we have with Windows, where it's been sort of tested manually, but we don't have any continuous testing for it yet. So we know it works today. We don't know if it'll work, next week or next year until we sort of start beefing up our tests a little bit. But if ARM support is something that you are interested in or excited about, please let us know so that we can know how or whether to prioritize getting some of that sort of continuous support set up, so that we will know that it keeps working going forward. Let's see. So the next thing was we didn't get the Kubernetes version upgraded as part of this release candidate. So it's at 125, but I think we are, I think we could have technically via our policy, which means that for 126, we'll definitely want to look at upgrading our version. So the release gets cut next week. So sometime probably in the first half of August, we will go through and bump versions for Kubernetes up to the next version. I think we're at 122 right now, so I think we bump up to 1.23 if I recall correctly. I can remember that right. Somewhere around there.
What are we at now? Kubernetes version, cluster version 122 is what we're at now.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So my memory is correct. Yeah. So we're at 122 right now. So we'll bump up to 1.23 as part of the 1.26 release. All right. So next thing, I stuck your name on this one, Mark, which was I noticed yesterday that you'd gone through and pinged some issues, marking them as stale. And I thought maybe it'd be like I started then like kind of going through myself, and I thought, oh, maybe we should just kind of do this together during the community meeting and say like, let's just start with like the very, very oldest issues and work our way forwards, going through maybe 5 to 10 per meeting. We could label them as sort of triage, so we know how far we got last time if there are things that we leave open. But I think if we start with the oldest ones, we'll find a lot of things that are, obsolete or haven't been touched in ages, or that maybe can be sort of closed out to reduce the backlog. So I kind of put that at the end of the list of things I put on the agenda, and we can maybe do that at the end of the meeting after we go over anything else people want to talk about.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Okay, and then you put the next two on here.
Did. This is one that has come up before. So this is game servers in allocated state can respond to fleet updating. Probably not, maybe not. Maybe I'm going to edit that title. Came a couple of times in Slack. Basically, the scenario is, say you have a long-running game server process, like say a persistent world or like a lobby. Just a lobby is fine. And you run a rolling update, and you want to actually, I think there's actually two scenarios here because I was thinking about this tonight. There's I think two actual things that I think we can do. One is you may want to stop allocating or reallocating to those persistent lobby servers because they're an old version, or you want to tell those ones, hey, like tell all your players that they need to get out in like 10 minutes or something like that. They need to be like aware somehow that a rolling update has occurred.
So we basically want to allow people to drain, right? So I think,
yeah,
especially in some of our scenarios with high density and with reusing game servers, it's the game server by default will just kind of keep going, right? It won't know that it's time to exit, right? And this would basically be one way to signal the game server, like, hey, there's a new version. You should start whatever you need to do so that you can exit. So if it typically gets reused, 5 or 10 times, maybe it stops going back into the ready state and just exits at the end of the next one, or it applies some like a little bit of jitter if you have a lot of them, so that you don't have everybody exit at the same time. And then like for like the persistent one, you can do something similar where you, like you said, stop allocating. So you stop reusing in like the high density scenario, because if you keep reallocating it might last forever. And that sort of will effectively start draining it. And then if the game server wants to watch, the label or annotation or whatever we put on it, it can then also start draining itself, right? It can move existing players off if it wants to, so that it can cleanly shut down. So I think having a signal that the game server knows that it is now out of date makes a lot of sense. So the question is just how to give it that signal, right?
Yeah. So the idea that I actually had, so the other thought I had as well is like, if somebody doesn't want this, there's probably no reason to go and apply labels or annotations or something to all the game servers, because it's just extra load on etcd, and like that's not necessarily a good thing. So my actual thought here was to add a section to the fleet spec where you could have like I'm not sure what to call it. We'll call it action for lack of a better term, where you could specify what label and or annotation you would want applied to your allocated game server when a rolling update occurs. And I think I was like, because by default does nothing. Like all the allocated ones are left alone, nothing happens. But that gives you the flexibility to be able to be like, oh, apply this label, which will drop it out of, say, like the allocation pool, or override a label that you would normally use and like turns it off. So suddenly like it's gone. Or you could just be like, this annotation that I know to look for, because then you can use the SDK watch game server and be like, oh, I got the annotation I was expecting. And so now I know that we're in a rollover state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess the question there is this something that we think most or all people will eventually be interested in, and we should just do it by default, even if it adds a little bit of extra load? Or is it something that we think is an edge case for only specific types of games? Because if we ask people to put stuff in their YAML, and that's like extra config you have to put in every single time, you're creating a new fleet and you're applying a fleet update. Versus if it's something the system just does, then it's something that maybe you can rely on. So
Yeah.
I guess the question is like, is it something everybody's going to want and the system should just do it by default? Or is it something that applies only to a subset, and so it makes sense not to add the extra load for people who don't care about this feature?
Yeah. I think if you have a session-based game that is like one session per container, this is something you probably don't care about. Or like if your timeout is like, if you're running like you run 5 sessions and then you delete or something like that, you probably don't care. I mean, there might be a minor optimization there, but you probably don't care.
If the sessions are short, right? Like if the sessions are 30 minutes each and you run 10 of them before restarting, maybe you do care because that's a long enough period of time that you want to recycle that container. If the sessions are, a minute each and you run 5 of them, like 5 minutes is maybe fine to just let it go, right?
The other thought I had around making it configurable means that it solves so there's 2 thoughts I had there too. One, it solves it makes it really easy if you want to like in a reallocation type scenario, if you want to be able to just turn off that allocation without having to conform to whatever we provide. So having that configuration option. And then it also allows for, if at any point in time we want to add extra actions to some other feature that we've added in the future, to be like, because there's the second one that I want to talk about, which is like waiting as well. Like if you wanted to, if we had a waiting situation, we could add to that set of being like, you could set a label, you could set an annotation, you could set your wait to 0. You could do whatever makes sense for your game. And so I'm sort of leaning more towards the flexibility side than necessarily the like, let's do it for you side.
Right. I mean, it also allows you to say like, on this update, I want to set a label to take it out of allocations, but on the next update, maybe I don't. Like maybe
you don't.
Sometimes you care and sometimes you don't. And if the system does it every time, then all of a sudden you're having to change like your game server allocation code and your matchmaker at the same time you're doing a rollout, like just to kind of, make the behavior change one time, right? So I think, sort of decoupling those where if you always put something in your game server allocation, you don't always have to apply that label on update, but you can if you don't want to reallocate.
Okay. So it sounds like that vaguely makes that does sort of resonate. I'll write up some sort of design at some point.
And then we'll argue over names for a while.
Exactly. That is and as such as it should be.
Cool. So the next thing you said was kind of related, which was the weighted allocations.
Yeah. So this came up a while ago. And I kind of went, nah. This was before we had high density, and it was kind of a bit of a, if I like, it was a bit of a fudge to be like, how do I get dynamic resource allocation without actually having dynamic resource allocation yet inside Kubernetes? Was kind of where it was going. And eventually, basically what I suggested down the bottom is like, you could set like 3 levels of labels and then use the preferred selectors, or now we have just selectors, to be able to be like, okay, high importance, medium importance, low importance. And like, you could set it appropriately. And you could still do that. But basically I was like, okay, let me think of this. Like the big scenario I think of is if you have high density game servers, and maybe you're doing it such that, which I wouldn't be surprised if you're like one game server per node, which would actually make a lot of sense in many ways. How do you, with the current system, ensure that you're packed? Because the allocator is going to just be like, there's one game server on each node. I have no idea, unless you're using player tracking, which you might be, but you might not be. I have no idea what's got the most amount of load on it. Now, you could use some labels, but that doesn't tie into like fleet downscaling or anything like that. And so I was like, maybe we actually should revisit this now that we have the high density stuff, because it basically, my other thought here is there are requests we have for like rooms, like count how many rooms I have and like how many game sessions. I'd like to be a little bit more flexible. I'm trying to think of good ways to do that, so that we can work with.
I think the label thing you mentioned sounds pretty suboptimal to me, because I think one of the reasons you would put only one per node is to avoid the load on etcd. And if you're then hitting etcd with a label every time you're adding somebody to that node, like that might in some ways defeat the purpose.
Wait would probably end up doing that well, you'd probably, I guess, like if you pass a threshold, you'd move from medium to high or something. Like you could do something like that. I mean, we could also do something like weighted could be similar. As you might want to like change your weight as like you add a room or something like that. But I'm like, even if we're doing high density, even within like if you had a node that had 3 allocated game servers and another node that has 3 allocated game servers on it, Agones has no idea which of those game servers has more people on it or doing more important things, whatever that important quote unquote thing is. And I've also had conversations with people who are like, we want to reallocate, but we want to reallocate to like the game server that has the most interesting thing happening to it, right? Like, I don't know, there's like this big battle or like we're tracking events inside it. And I was like, yeah, well, then you maybe just add like an interesting label to it and then like you can send it to that way. But that gives you there's no granularity into it. It's either interesting or it's not. And so I was like, basically, I wanted to bring it up and be like, does this make sense? I'm happy to write this up. I think it affects a lot of interesting things as well. Like, it's not just allocation, but like we should also be getting rid of the stuff that is the lower weight. Like when we scale down, like we should like go that way. So it hits a lot of marks. But I was going back and forth in my mind of like, do we need to do this or does it? I think it makes more sense now. So do you think it makes more sense to explore this further?
I think with both with reallocation and with high density,
Yeah.
because before if like everything was equal and we assumed that everything sort of ran once and exited, you have this very homogeneous set of things. And so like as person puts in the solution, like weighting them all equally and saying they're all homogeneous, they all have equal weights. So then you can sort based on, which node has the most allocated ones to figure out how to pack. But all of a sudden, I think with things being reused, it becomes easy to end up with one thing that's recycling itself on a node, holding that node from being auto scaled down. Or with high density, like you said, it's easy to put 5 players on every game server when they can hold 100 because you don't realize necessarily like I should be packing over here, right? So it seems like it fits in with the sort of meta sort of project goal of packing and density and cost reduction, to have a better way to do that now that we have more sophisticated features, right? And that's basically sort of what was described in this issue was like the default, if you're using it sort of in a basic way, is everything has equal weights.
Yeah.
But when everything isn't actually equal anymore, like how do we express that? So I think weight was sort of the initial proposal of how to express these things aren't equal anymore. And maybe weight is sort of the right way to express that, or maybe there's something else that we can use to express that. But basically, I think that the point is valid about reordering this sort order to get more optimal packing. Like that's really the goal here, right?
No, absolutely, I 100% agree. And what was I going to say? Yeah, and I think at the time, I think it seemed like a niche use case, and now that we've expanded more, I think it seems like something that's going to be useful for a lot of people.
Well, I think it also sort of degrades gracefully, if you will, in the sense that if you don't set this, everything works as it does today.
That's expected,
right? Like
exactly.
This is an extra level of influence you can have over the packing if it's something that applies to you. But if you don't care about it, everything works as it used to. Which I think is a really nice way to have a feature where it doesn't impose any cognitive load on people who don't care about it. But if you do care about it, it gives you more control, right?
Yeah, because I feel like I'm also in Slack and outside, I've had some conversations where people are doing multiple sessions per game server instance as well. And a lot of the time they're like, could you just count rooms? But I feel like, much like we do with player tracking essentially, but I feel like that is a very specific answer to a problem that I think we could generalize better through some of these tools, so that we can support a wider variety of more flexible types of orchestration, basically, rather than just being like, okay, we have like a thing. Because the other, and we can discuss this in design. The other thing that makes this fun is like in a distributed environment, what does weight do? Does it do nothing? I'm not sure. So in distributed environment, we allocate randomly, essentially, so that we distribute the load. Does that change with weights? I actually don't know. That's a fun question.
I think if you wanted the random distribution and you just don't apply weights, again, like it degrades. Not degrades is the wrong word, but like it behaves exactly as it does today. Right? So if you want today's behavior, you just don't set weights. So I think the question would be like, if you want distributed, what does a weight even mean at that point?
What does it
like,
mean exactly?
Does that even have a useful sort of semantic meaning in a case where you're trying to spread instead of pack? And so,
well,
I think maybe the answer there is
useful like, in terms of like that scenario where like I want to allocate to like the most interesting game server, right. Or I want to allocate so that like you might want to keep players in a group up until a point. Like you might be like, I want to make sure there's at least 10 people on this server, or like we can do some of that with player tracking to a degree, but like weights makes that a little bit easier. Yeah, I don't know. All right, well, I'll write up some notes and we'll work it out.
Okay, sounds good.
Maybe it's like a weighted randomization rather than a full, you go there. I don't know. Anyway, cool.
Awesome. Does anyone else on the call have anything they want to add to the agenda? We've gotten to the end of what was pre-populated in the notes talk.
Did I have anything else that I wanted to talk about?
All right, so we're about halfway through our allotted time. Can we spend maybe like 10 minutes going through some of the oldest issues and decide if we can either mark them as stale and close them at the next meeting, or just close some of them now?
That sounds reasonable. Did you want me to drive, or did you want to drive?
Yeah, if you could just keep sharing your screen, that'd be awesome.
I can do that. How do we want to sort? I like to sort by recently updated, because if you've put something on it, then it shows up at the top. So you can see all my stale stuff. That's why I like to do it. Because you can see, then you can be like, these are the ones that were most recently touched. Everything. Should we go backwards?
Yeah, let's start at the end and maybe like box with 10 minutes and see how far we get.
That works. Dynamic. Yeah. Or actually, is there anything here that jumps out to you as something that could potentially be stale? It's probably the easier way of doing it.
Sure. Although you're still sharing the notes and not whatever you're looking at.
That would help. So the thing I was saying is I sorted by updated descending. So these are the ones that were touched last. So we know that those have actually been messaged and got stuff on them.
Cool.
So they have been triaged. Anyway, going back to the end. That's
page 6.
Oh my God. Some of that player tracking stuff's been around for so long. It's embarrassing.
It's at the end now. Okay. So let's walk through from the bottom up. So support for dynamic port ranges.
I think from memory, that's like being able to specify, like, I want port 700 to 7000. I don't think it's unreasonable. I just need somebody to do it.
Okay. So let's mark this as help wanted then. So I think it's basically saying, like, instead of giving me a port, I need 10 ports. And I don't care which 10 ports they are, but they need to start at some number, right?
Yeah, it's not unreasonable. It just
I guess I'm also curious about the actual need to implement this, since this was filed over 4 years ago and it hasn't been touched since. Like, does anybody, how much is it? How important is this really?
Let me.
I mean, it's because it's a little bit. I mean, I guess I don't know why you'd need a contiguous range of ports. I mean, if you needed 10 ports, you could always put 10 ports in your spec. They might not be contiguous ports, but you would get 10 at that point.
I think it's a legacy game server kind of issue. Like it was built this way and it expects the ports to go in like a row.
N plus +1, N+2, N+3.
Yeah. I have a couple of thumbs up on it. I'll check a help. That's
right, cool. So that'll bump it away from the end of the list next time we go through.
That's
now
true.
It's been touched. All right. Unit tests for the C++ SDK. Does it still not have any unit tests?
It does not have any. It did probably. Okay. Actually, we do have. Oh yeah, no, it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. So I would mark that as help wanted also. As you said, we need someone with C++ experience. Who wants
good
to
first issue, I think. If somebody has the right experience, I think that's.
Yep, I agree.
Refresh, so that one goes away.
So the next one I filed, which is coming up with a process to push container images. I think this was, I can't remember if I filed this for security concerns, like around how many people have access to clobber things, or if this was more about like, we should define when we actually update our examples, because those are two separate issues, right?
True.
But I think you have the newer issue about artifact registry, which allows us to separate things into different buckets and have a larger number of people be able to push examples, then maybe we can push releases and so forth. So I think maybe we should just go ahead and close this and link to the other one and make sure that as we're migrating images over that I mean, there's not really even much here to take into account. I don't think. I think this probably can be marked as obsolete based on our future, thought/plan to move more over. Because I know you moved the first stuff over already.
Yeah, the other thought I have on this is probably duplicate to the work that I'm not sure if we have a ticket for of moving a lot of the release stuff into cloud build. So once we have that as well, I can't find it. All right, let me find the. Here we go. All right, so let's say this is duplicated by. All right, so we're going to say duplicate. Duplicated. Beautiful. Love it. We good?
Yeah.
We happy? All right, hit the button.
Yep.
Blam. Cool. This is old.
Also, you can reverse your sort order, so you're not on the end of page 6, so that you're at the top of page 1 if you sort by updated ascending instead of updated descending.
That's a really reasonable way to do it.
but
then I feel like I'm at the end.
That's true. All right.
This is reasonable.
And allocator with tracing.
I feel like something like this came up again recently. Is there a duplicate? Or did somebody just write something on here?
No, there are no updates to this one. I mean, the other thing is this one's also particularly old. I think a lot of stuff has changed since then. I think open tracing and open census have now actually sort of come together in open telemetry. That was like a future thing when this was created. So I think we could sort of go with open telemetry and feel a lot more future proof. So I think this again is like help wanted. I'm not sure this is a good first issue though.
We have this one too, which came out recently. I think this is duplicate. We can mark this as duplicate of the other one.
Okay, that sounds
duplicate. Yeah, like I think we're all marking this as triage, marking as duplicates. But definitely. There. Sounds like this person actually did it.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's like send us a PR.
Send us a PR. Cool. All right, which also means that if from here, yeah, so you just got the mention in it. Beautiful. Help wanted. What happened? Oh, where did that? Oh, Cyril added help wanted and then took it away. I don't know if it's a good first issue, but yeah, there's some interesting questions about open telemetry versus open census, but we'll worry about that when somebody actually makes some decisions. Because it's still in this, like, the tracing stuff is stable, but the metric stuff doesn't seem to be yet, and it's taking a long time, and it may just make sense to just keep open census for now because it works. But either way, having something is good. Metrics players, we should absolutely do this like at some point. It's been there since 2019. We should absolutely do that though. Oh, we have a new friend. Did I not hit the right button? Oh, there we go. Hello. Increase the installation security by replacing TLS certs. Hello, Akil. We are just triaging old issues to see if there's stuff we can get rid of. When installing Agones using the YAML file install Helm TLS certs that are used by service as a default to detect inserts. That is true. Users may inadvertently use the solution without replacing the certificate and expose. That's bad. Place before inserting place certificates generally should not offer.
That's definitely a good point. I think we definitely encourage people to use Helm in production for other reasons. And I think a lot of people end up using Helm for configurability.
Yeah.
Although YAML, I think, is sort of the quick getting started path where you can just apply something and be up and running for tinkering and testing stuff out.
I would be curious to know the opinions of people who have more experience on security than I do, which is on, like, it's an internal, like, the certs are used inside the cluster and how much that matters. Is it more important that the certs are different, or is it just like okay that there are certs? But yes, that is not unreasonable. But I don't know how you can do a YAML installation without having a static set of certs. You don't really have a choice.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we could make it part of the release process to like rotate them once every 6 weeks or something. Like, I don't know how much that helps, because then they're still the same certs for everybody who uses that particular release, if they're using it via YAML.
You know what we could do is actually have Helm generate the certs rather than the file. So every time you run a release, the cert will get rotated. Because every time you gen an index, it'll just create a whole new cert, which is basically how Helm works now. Because when it generates, it installs, it does gen cert.
So that would actually happen every time we touch anything related to Helm. So it might happen more often than every release, but it would certainly at least happen once every release.
Yeah, as soon as you run gen, like if you make a change to any of the YAML files, like then you will get a new thing.
Right.
Should I make a note about that?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Another thought that one other thought. We have a community call. Rather than pull certs or whatever it is. From static files. All right. So from Helm, every line. Make gen install. This is not perfect. YAML install gen. Another install. At least you have different certs. Good. This was a good help wanted.
Yes, that sounds good. Awesome. So we used up our allotted 10 minutes of triage. So I think this has been useful. I think if we just spend a few minutes every meeting, we can make it longer or shorter. But I think if we keep going, sort of grooming the backlog this way, I think that will both remind us of things. Like we saw a couple things here. We're like, oh yes, like there's duplicate issues, or this is something that came up recently in a different context. Like maybe this is something we should work on, or oh, this is obsolete. We shouldn't work on this. So I think this has been pretty useful.
I like it.
Cool.
Like
is there? So we can go back to the agenda. I know we had one new person join. Is there anything you wanted to add to the agenda? Any questions you had for us?
Do you just want to say hi? You don't have to. It's okay. Akil, did you want to say hi? We cannot hear you. I don't know if you're talking. You can always drop something in chat if you just want to say hi there too.
Hello, now you can hear me.
Oh, very quiet, but we can hear you. Nice to meet you.
I just saw the link on Twitter, so I joined.
Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the project. Do you work on games right now?
No, I just follow the open source projects. Those find to me interesting.
Awesome.
I didn't use Agones, but I tried previously. I just previously also came at while searching on the projects. You might not remember me.
Well, good to see you again then.
Good to see you too.
I don't think I have anything else. I'm just testing for that typo. Yeah. All right, cool. You have anything else, Robbie?
Nope. I think that should do it for this month.
That sounds good. What was I going to say? What was I going to work on next? What was I? Have I got anything that I've already assigned to myself? Oh, I really want to get that fleet-specific Prometheus metric stuff done. That I've been talking about for like 2 months. There was one other issue that I really wanted to get done that I think is a good optimization where if I can find it now that we're here. Oh, this might be, this actually, speaking of that, I think, actually, let me check on it on here too. Something. Thanks again. This issue. Oh, I think this has been fixed. This is if you had more than one. More than one inactive game server set. I think that's been fixed. But there was this one, which I think. Yeah, which is this. This is the thing I want to fix. And you saw this the other day, Robbie, that if you scale down a fleet and there are game servers that are not ready yet, they get left behind rather than get it deleted first. I don't know why, but that seems silly. That's been there for a while. Actually, I'm going to assign that to myself too, because that's annoying me. That's been annoying me for a while.
And there were a couple other things we mentioned during the call of help wanted things that would be awesome if anybody wants to pick up. And I think the other thing that people would love for you to work on, Mark, is the player tracking stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I know is a big bucket of work.
It's redoing all those resource APIs, and I really don't want to. Fortunately, also a bunch of other like smaller triage kind of issues that pop up a lot that take up a lot of my time. So getting back to big chunks of work is always a struggle. But I do want to, once we have auto scaling, actually, I'm just looking at it. So once we have auto scaling, actually, you know what? I might also assign metrics. Player tracking to me as well. That's all my stuff. I was going to come back around to fixing up the resource APIs once we actually have everything that works. And the I would set capacity on allocation would also be useful. I'm not going to assign that to myself yet. All right. Anyway, that's giving myself way too much work. Okay, I'll stop talking now.
Cool. I think we can call it for today then. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you for doing stuff and seeing your face in that.
Hopefully we'll see everybody next month. Take care.
See you later.
Bye.